Stefan, here we are, lovely sunny day, about to launch your new project, Dancewise, Trauma Release Through Movement. But in order to find out how you got there, we're going to wind right back to when you were little, and I understand it was listening to your mother singing when you were very, very small, which was the first inspiration which ignited that love of music.
Yeah, Venetia, it was. I do, retrospectively, I'm so glad that my mum loved to sing, because I soaked up her singing. I just adored it, and as soon as I was old enough I was joining in, and then we were harmonising and singing rounds, and I had no idea at the time because I was just enjoying myself, but it was a musical training, and I'm not sure she was doing that consciously. But she liked the fact she loved to sing. She liked the fact that I was into it. It was also very soothing and therapeutic for me, especially at bedtime. I was an anxious kid. I had nightmares, and music was just the most wonderful thing, enchanting, soothing, therapeutic.
Because you grew up on a kibbutz, I understand.
I started on a kibbutz. My parents had been living there for 3 years when I emerged. And at that time, the system that was considered very normal then, 1951, was that parents had very little contact with their children. All the infants, even very young infants, were looked after by a volunteer, but actually not a volunteer, because everyone in strict rota had to do that job, whether or not they liked children.
Right.
And very long working hours, and at the end of that long working day, then the mother could be reunited with a young infant. My mother hated that system, actually, and when I was 10 months old they came back to England, and she didn't want to leave again, so I grew up in East London.
Oh, right.
I'm an Hackney lad.
East London, okay. And because
EastEnders.
Because you've also got Romanian and Russian and Polish ancestry as well, haven't you?
Your memory's better than mine, you know. Yeah, you're right. On my father's side, they lived in Belarus, and his mother escaped when she was about 8 with her family from very serious pogroms. Their neighbours mostly were killed, and they just about escaped to East London. And on my mother's side, they were from Romania. They were also Jewish refugees, but from a couple of generations before. And they'd settled in East London, when my parents met in East London. So and the rumour is that on the Romanian side there is gypsy blood. I like to believe that rumour.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The generational imprints, if you like, and how that has seeded what you are, you know, what you love, what your passion is. You've got your love of international music, the folk tradition specifically, circle dances, community. It's like all those little seeds were...
Yes. Humour, food,
joy, and appreciating, you know, the rich, juicy community living.
But it's interesting that as I've come to get to know different cultures, partly through my work and partly through friends, I see very similar patterns in many cultures. The warmth, humour, music, dance, community are at the heart of many of the older cultures.
Cooking together.
Yeah, a little bit hard to imagine when we've grown up in Western Europe, because those things are more in the background or sometimes lost. Yeah.
So, Stefan, where have we got up to?
We were talking about my East London and my family roots.
East London and family roots. So, school, you said you were very sensitive and very bit anxious.
I was a bully magnet.
You're a bully magnet?
Yeah. Yeah. They just, you know, some kids are naturally much more assertive than others, and I was at the extreme end of the non-assertive thing. I didn't know really how to say no, so certain kids could see it, you know, and they did what they needed to do. They found their mark, and I didn't know what to do in response, really. Never understood it. Why would you want to be so horrible? But I didn't know how to stand up to it.
Did they physically hit you?
Oh yeah,
What?
yeah. Well, the most memorable, funnily enough, because it was so mystifying, I got beaten up by a gang when I was about 7,
Gosh.
and they were all shouting, "You killed Jesus," and I didn't know who Jesus was, and I knew I hadn't killed anyone, and they didn't believe me. So, and then my mother had to try and explain it. And I don't know even how they knew I was a little Jewish kid, because I didn't think I looked so different, but presumably there was some way that they knew. But yes, I was definitely someone that seemed to attract bullies. And my fighting style, I can demonstrate. It was like this. It wasn't very effective. It seemed like a good idea when I was young. I thought, how could anyone really, possibly overpower me if I was doing that? But somehow they did manage to.
And for people who are listening, who aren't living in Britain, who aren't aware of the different areas of London, I mean, East London in the 50s was quite a challenging.
Yeah, we
place
had
for
we were famous for teddy boys, as they were called. They weren't like teddy bears, so they could be a bit rougher than that. And yeah.
And the gangs and.
There were gangs. Yeah, that's right. Even in the playground, there were gangs.
And were you was that trauma throughout your school days that you had to, or did you?
No, it was
When you went to secondary school, was that different?
intermittent. There was some bullying in secondary school. Yeah, mainly in the first year. The second year seemed to ritually victimise the first years, and they did things to their sensitive parts that I don't want to describe too much.
Gosh.
But I didn't think of it as unusual or traumatising. It's not that I enjoyed it, but I just thought, well, that's
Children do, don't they?
that's
They
what
accept
life's
what's
like, and there are nice kids who are my friends, nasty kids you try and avoid. It just seemed like a normal thing.
And so fast forward a bit. So after school days, you obviously had that experience at school and of bullying, and but were you aware of having any effect on you at that time, or was that only later?
No, I wasn't, and to be honest, I don't think it had a big effect. I think the big effect, when I tried to feel and look back, was the very early infancy lack of contact with parents. I can trace back things that were a struggle in my childhood and later on, that I can track back to that because it makes sense of it, and I hadn't made sense of it before. Things like insomnia, anxiety, nail biting, obsessiveness. Fortunately, all these things are very much in the background. They're still there as like a little undertow or an echo. So I've had so many positive experiences overlaying them. But I can, track joining the dots backwards. I think that was the most significant thing. And most of the people after that, the early days of the kibbutz, revised their ideas because they could see that children were affected by that. Being children of the community didn't mean putting them all in a room and not giving them parental contact. It was a very slightly bizarre way to interpret that, but it made sense at the time.
And right across the board, children who grew up in the 50s and the 60s are very different parenting ideas than there are now.
Outside of the kibbutz movement, there was the famous Spock, Dr. Spock, who said you shouldn't spoil children, you should, discipline them. And a lot of parents, with the very best of intentions, were very hands-off.
Leave them to cry.
Yes, toughen them up. We had a different view then, and we didn't understand, society generally didn't understand about the needs of infants and didn't really know much about trauma. All we knew about it then was some shell shock victims, adult shell shock victims. That was all we really knew as a collective about trauma.
So after school, what happened next? Did you go to university or anything?
I did. I was lucky. I had a year in between. I did social work. It was a very dramatic year. The the social work, there were only 2 social workers in the little project where I worked, and the man committed suicide during that time.
Gosh.
He had had a long history of struggling with guilt and depression because he'd accidentally run over 2 teenagers when he was much younger and had never forgiven himself, which is why he became a social worker. Another story. But so the other social worker was actually his lover and partner, so she took time off, and this very naive, sensitive 18-year-old was left in charge of a project in Archway because they had no one else to do it. So it was a very toughening rite of passage for me, being rather sort of dreamy and impractical, with support from some of the local people keeping the project going.
What I find fascinating, and you're confirming that, is even from babyhood there are seeds of a trajectory, if you like, in somebody's life. There's a guiding hand, even if they're not aware of it, which, if followed, propels them into what they're going to be unfolding in later life. And it's like with you, the bullying, the early experience on the kibbutz, and then the experience with the social worker. These little signatures of experience are then, and it's also weaving in the community aspect as well, which is where we are now.
I'm so glad you put it that way, Venetia, because it's really weird, but I'm trying to remember the chap who said it. He's an Irish writer. He said something like, what curses you blesses you. And it sounds like such an outrageous statement, but I guess it depends how things work out. But in my case, I would say thank you for all those challenges, because they sent me on a trajectory, being like a labyrinth journey that took me into an incredibly fulfilling life path, and one that has meaning, purpose, very deep friendships, and a sort of self-healing while being able to give out something to others. And I can't imagine that I could have got to that trajectory without some of those initiations, rough initiations as they're known, not ones that you choose, but yeah, I do now think it has shaped me. And I think anybody who comes across you or meets you, they will instantly feel that compassionate heart you have, and how that's carried through. You just feel it, and without those early experiences, you might have gone something totally different. But that's given you the pearl in the oyster, if you like, the grit.
You are that you've got the pearl now, but it was the grit which created the pearl.
Yeah, I really do look at it that way. And in saying that, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that everybody's traumatic experiences are positive, or be grateful, but I'm not saying that. I don't know, and sometimes it's such a tsunami of challenge that it's not one that you know how to ride on top of. But the way it configured in my life, somehow it was things that I was able to grow through, come through. And because I don't know your life history, so this is all new to me too. And so after your experience with social work, I do know you did become a teacher. So I don't know quite what teacher that was. So what happens after the social work? Everything's always a bit non-obvious with me, because I went to teacher training college, Avery Hill Teacher Training College, to do my postgrad teacher training, to teach social science in schools. And during the course of my teaching practices in Sydenham Girls High School.
Is that in London?
Yeah. I decided actually I was better suited to primary school.
Right.
Because certainly in those days, I'm not sure if it applies now, there was a lot more flexibility for teachers to follow their passions, to do creative things, to educate, as in bring out children. And so much was very, very prescribed in secondary schools that I was feeling very what's the word? Bottled up, closed down. I can't think of quite the right word. I couldn't quite see inhibited by the syllabus, the syllabub, and not to mention inhibited by the fact that I couldn't control loads of teenagers. So I did get a job in primary schools actually, because on the basis of being able to offer music, being interested in remedial work, I got a job in primary schools.
I'm not actually sure I even know what in those days social sciences in schools was, so there might be other people who have no idea.
Going up the school, I was asked to teach integrated humanities, which I would call more like disintegrated humanities. It was history, geography and religion.
Oh.
Well, we're going to do Buddhism this term. Right now we're on to Hinduism. And I don't want to knock it. Actually, I learnt a bit by studying up for the lessons, doing it.
So you didn't stick around doing that then?
That was a short career.
How long did you do that?
I had a lot of short careers. I was 2 years in school teaching. And then I what was I doing after that? I was part-time music teaching, independent music teaching, one-to-one. Loved that. Thrived on it. And part-time making pine wood tables with a rather unusual chap. I don't know. I think I was still not very good at saying no. I got into this sort of dingy basement without a proper toilet or ventilation, making pine wood tables for an odd fellow. But that was my part-time job along with the music teaching. I think I've always been drawn to unusual situations and people. So I guess it was part of the great learning.
Yes, variety. And
I mean, I was an odd fellow too. So I suppose we were oddballs together.
And the music teaching, was there particular instruments you were?
Yeah, it was guitar in those days. I wasn't yet a multi-instrumentalist. That happened gradually.
So when we still haven't got up to the dancing yet, so
yeah.
So the weaving of the inspiration from your mother way back. Did she continue to sing, or was it just when you were little, and did that carry on?
It didn't really. In retrospect, if I could rewrite it and replay it, we would have some good sing-songs together. I don't know why, that just kind of... She became very passionate about her art. She was a sculptor.
Oh, right.
Probably as obsessive and workaholic as I can be. So, she would disappear for long hours working on the piece, trying to perfect it. And it would be right from 7 out of 8 angles, and then when you change the 8th angle you have to go all the way around and change it again. It's very engrossing sculpture.
And have you got any brothers and sisters?
I've got a 3-year younger brother.
Oh.
And he's a bit artistic, but he was more towards the business side of things. He had the practical aspect of our heritage, and I got a lot of the creative, intuitive bit. So, and he's been a very good helpmate over the years because he's practical and he can give me very good feedback about things.
And that's still ongoing?
It's ongoing.
Oh, right, great.
Yeah, we've become better and better friends over the years. We weren't, at that age, we weren't great friends. We managed to be brothers, but we didn't realise we had a lot in common, but we found a lot more since then.
Oh, great.
So the dancing.
The dancing.
When I was at uni, I was a rather shy chap. I wasn't going out with anyone, but there was a girl I did like. She had a boyfriend, so I wasn't making any moves. But when she said to me, "Do you want to come along to a dance?" What kind of dance? A barn dance. I said, okay, because I thought it would be nice to hang out. And I went to this barn dance, quite enjoyed it. And they were playing in the break some international songs. It turned out one of them was Romanian. And my heart just went, oh, 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 oh! Something's happening here.
Really? Yes.
I couldn't put words to it. Something's happening that means something. It sort of woke something up. So I discovered that I liked all kinds of dance music because I had a depressive streak in those days, and it seemed to be like an antidote. But especially Eastern European music, it hit some chord in me. It was like a new flavour that was wow. And as you say, looking back now, I can see, well, okay, maybe I had the sort of receptors, inherited receptors, I don't know.
Yes.
But it stirred something in me, and it'd be so not long after uni, I joined an international dance class and found that I adored the music, and I got more and more into the dance and movement.
Was that like circle dancing, or was that
Yes,
like folky?
it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
If I say it's the same, there's a slightly different approach, but a lot of the dances are the same.
Mm.
I was learning international folk dances, traditional dances, all done in a circle, holding hands. And quite a lot of what we do in the Circle Dance Network is that, with the addition of choreographies that I and lots of other people introduced to all kinds of music. So it's got roots in the past, and it's got shoots in the present and future.
And arms stretching around the world.
It do. I like that. Arms stretching around the world. Yes.
So we're back so in your 20s now when you learnt this. Is that right?
Yeah, I got really into international folk dance in my 20s. I was doing Balkan folk dance, Israeli dance, international dance, and I kept on enjoying the sort of Kayleys and barn dances as well. I had friends who were into it, so we egged each other along.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd started, about mid-20s, I'd started calling barn dances.
And tell me what that means. I mean,
Okay, if you go to a barn dance, you've got lines going forward, lines going back, gallop down, gallop back, swing your partner, do-si-do, and there's a band and there's a caller. So by that time, by my mid-20s, I joined a band. It was we were playing mostly Irish folk music and offering concerts and Kayleys, and I was calling for the Kayleys.
Oh.
So I was by then emerging from my shyness and getting into, well actually I was much less shy when I had a role, like shouting at people to do-si-do, than when I was just in a room with two people having a chat. Hello Tommy, do you want to be famous?
Hello doggy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the camera's got Tommy.
It can do.
Yeah, I think Tommy should be in the film. This is Tommy. He's Kath's dog.
Hello Tommy.
And Kath's not here at the moment, but she's very kindly letting us use her house and garden for this interview. And Tommy is he's a natural star.
Okay.
So yes, I'd sort of, within a few years, I was gaining confidence partly through the dancing and partly through life. And as a hobby, just calling dances while playing with my band, which means multitasking a bit.
So, a lot of people in their mid-20s, the last thing they'd want to be doing is folk dancing. They're going off to raves, or mind you, that's before raves, isn't it?
It was pre-raves. It was still discos.
Discos,
yes. Discos.
So, what would you say at that time? Can you remember? You've obviously went to the disco as well. What made you think, this is my tribe?
Well,
the folky.
Let me describe a disco experience. I only had a few of them. So there's
the Bee Gees.
There's 14 or 15-year-old me with a few school friends, and we're all going off to Birdland in the West End, feeling very growed up. Birdland, I might even have a beer, if I can get away with it. And I was so desperately shy. This is one of the things that I found entertaining when I look back at it, that I didn't want to ask a girl for a dance, not only because she might refuse me, but even worse, she might say yes, and then I wouldn't know what the hell to do, and I'd feel really embarrassed. But it was such an embarrassing experience. And I was underage, for all of us kids drank underage, and I tried to drink enough. I didn't have that much pocket money, but I tried to drink enough to lose my inhibitions, and it didn't work at all.
Cheap cider.
It didn't work. I still felt desperately shy and slightly drunk, which is not supposed to happen. So anyway, my experiences of discos weren't exactly being a happy bunny. Quite like the music. I somewhat envied the people who were dancing freely. But as I say, when I had this I didn't look at it at the time as an initiation into barn dancing, and this band struck up these East European tunes which I'd never heard before, different from the Hebrew songs that I'd heard in my childhood. Something went zing, And I didn't think to myself, oh, this is my tribe. I just thought, something's happening and I like it and I'm drawn to it.
Your
And that's
soul
all,
ignited.
that's all I knew. Yeah, it could say soul. Something in me responded. And as I was doing these international dances, some of the tunes, not all of them, just had that effect. It was like, oh my God. Oh, it's like meeting a part of yourself that had been orphaned or lost and had come home. It's a wonderful feeling.
And from there, in your 20s, doing the barn dancing and there being a caller for... Did you do line dancing as well?
Well, I touched on it. I didn't get so engrossed by it. But yeah, I've tried all sorts of things.
Yes. And so what happened next?
Well, I guess I was about 31 or 2. Well, there were various things that happened in my work life which I could tell you about maybe, but in terms of dance, I decided to start a class when I was about 31 or 2, I think maybe 32. I was living in Shepherd's Bush. I was the warden of a community house and they let me use a big room there, free,
Community
to
again?
start my dance class. And I got just a few people, you know, and I thought was, you know, and I charged a tiny bit, maybe it was £1. But it gave me a chance to start teaching. And I'd been doing folk dance, but I decided to call it circle dance because I wanted equality. I'd been in some rather competitive, cliquey groups. I'd enjoyed the dancing, but not so much the cliquiness. Wanted it to be very, inclusive, friendly, equal. And 2 of the people who came along said, oh, we've been looking for a circle dance group. And I said, oh, there are others. So then I heard that there's a whole network of people all around the country. It was fairly new at the time, doing something called circle dance. So I'd reinvented the wheel and attracted the wheel to me. It was wonderful, really.
Is there a difference between those circle dances and dances of universal peace?
Yeah.
There's a difference in...
Oh, yeah, there is, although there's an overlap, and some people love the two, just as there's an overlap between circle dance and folk dance. Dances of universal peace, mostly we're in twos, we're singing the music, we're looking at each other's eyes, and they're very connective. They tend to be slow, because to connect in that way, you need something fairly slow.
Right.
There are prayer songs drawn from different faiths, so it's an interfaith, multi-faith thing, and it has a lovely, friendly, connective vibe. Circle dancing is a huge umbrella of resources, which includes quite a lot of fast, fiery, intricate, high energy dances.
Like some of the Greek dances, for example.
Yeah, as well as the meditative side. It's very much respecting the polarity or the different aspects of humanity and energy. So there's a big frame in which they can become more integrated. The folk dance aspect tends to represent the earthy, strong, boundaried ones, but also that strong sense of community and solidarity and being interlinked. Some of the armholes are closely linked,
Right.
interwoven. There's a basket weave hold. Some of the other dances express more the air, the freedom of spirit, the fluidity, the meditative side. So that's circle dance, which some people call sacred circle dance. People tend not to sing very much in a circle dance group, so you're free to focus very much on what your body is doing. There are far fewer couple dances than there are in dances of universal peace or in many folk dance settings. It's very much you're part of this interwoven body. You become part of one larger body and moving together, and that's perhaps one of the key core experiences of circle dance.
Even the music and the dance, having had those early years, that you realise that stress and anxiety started to lift because beyond words, and you could have that sense of community and connectedness which you just described in the circle dancing, which you don't get in a disco.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
solitary disco. You may have a room full of people dancing, but it's very isolating, isn't
Well,
it? Whereas
well, you
you're
may be
saying-
connecting very much with a small group of people, or with one person if you fancy them, or something like that.
but it's not
It's a
hasn't got that
different
community
connection.
feel, has it?
That's true, although I think sometimes people at a rock concert, and it may happen in a disco, I haven't got enough
I was
experience, but I
thinking of
think,
disco with the lights.
yeah, I think they can be, because I sometimes these days go to a group that's called Ecstatic Dance, which is a bit like a sort of a hippie disco. They put on this wonderful music from Bali and here and there, and sometimes we even have the mirror ball because we're in the manor ballroom, and we just go and we dance freely. But there is definitely a feeling of connection.
I think they're different from the 70s discos.
I agree, and they are facilitated a little bit, so at the beginning and the end we come together and we speak together, so that also makes the connection. But I think just the fact that people if people are in a space feeling uninhibited, free and expressive in a way that's different from normal life, there may well be a feeling of bond or connection, but I think it's closer and more palpable in some situations, like if we are holding hand or if there is eye contact across a circle of people. I think it's stronger, it's more to the front. Yeah.
And I know you have got a wonderful story. Is it your aunt or is it your cousin Sylvia?
Oh well, neither of those is Sylvia, but
There was
there is a Sylvia in a story, but I'm not sure. Tell me where you're going.
Well, what
and
I was
I'll know
going
who it is.
was you were saying that initially, when you first went and met her, that there was
Okay,
she was
okay.
quite what you thought at the time, a bit off,
Well-
and then she experienced the dance, and then she melted, and the stress eased away, and you could feel her heart was melted as she connected in dance, which was beyond words and the music, and she softened and.
This is exactly right. Let
Yeah.
me give you the story and remind you the details. My aunt and my cousin were both in this story, and neither of them were Sylvia. So my cousin Judy and her mum, my aunt Evelyn, lived on the same kibbutz near to Jerusalem, and we had spoken for a while about me visiting them with a group who liked to dance, using the big space that had been pretty much unused and was full of clutter for ages, but they said we could clear it out and use it. The kibbutz could do with that sort of bit of, what do you say, like morale boosting or incentive to clear the area, and to be honest, they could do with the income from our group, but they were willing to work hard and arrange that my nephew Danny, the son of Judy, was willing to do the catering. So we had the invitation to stay on the kibbutz, and so as with many of I haven't sort of gone this far in the story yet, but with many of our group experiences, there were people from many different countries came together for a dance-related trip with me. In this instance, Bethan wasn't there. So I was hosting and teaching on this trip, about 30 guests. And so my cousin's called Judy, my aunt's called Evelyn. She recently passed away at 99 and a half,
Gosh.
having been fully compos mentis and active and creative until the very end. Very proud of her. The plane was delayed, and I think it's not unusual for Israeli security. It took ages for everyone to get through. So we arrived at the hotel very hungry, tired, somewhat stressed, maybe 10 at night. And my cousin had greeted us. She'd been in contact with someone, I think, on the mobile. We're going back, how many years? 15 years maybe? Something like 15 years. And she rang Sylvia, who was the manageress of the guest house, to say the guests have finally got here. And Sylvia said, well, it's too late. And Judy said, what do you mean? She says, I don't work after 9. So Judy said to us, well, there's 30 people from all these different countries who've been flying for hours. They're stressed and they're tired and they need to sleep. She said, well, I don't work after 9. So we got off to a great start there. She was eventually persuaded to come and open up the guest house. She was in a stinking mood. Slammed the door open and there you go. And so I didn't think we were going to be bestest friends. And I have to say that in the morning there was a lovely breakfast laid on, a typical Israeli breakfast. And in the middle of enjoying our breakfast, there was this great shout, and I thought, my God, is there like a fire or something? I couldn't quite understand it. And she was saying, eggs, the eggs are ready. But it sounded like someone sort of yelling at people. So I said to Judy, Sylvia doesn't seem to be the most natural person to run a guest house. And Judy said, well, she's had some hard times. Her parents both lost their lives in the Holocaust, and when you get to know her, she's not so bad. So anyway, by about day 3, Sylvia said something like, so what is this group anyway? Something like that. And I said, well, you must come along and just watch or join in or whatever you feel like. She came along and watched the circle dancing. And at the end of the evening, her eyes were tearful, and she said, oh, now I understand what you're doing. And I don't think there were many words, but she completely changed towards us. And by the end of the week, it felt like she was a friend. And it was actually one of my first experiences, direct experiences of someone who was acting in a post-traumatic way. I'm not sure if that's quite the best way to say it. Acting in a way that was very much formed by traumatic experience. And I realised that there was another side to her that was so totally different, that was hidden under her defences. It was a very, very active defence system.
Yes, I remember you saying that, because it's such a valuable ingredient into what's leading you to this project.
Yeah, it was one of those watershed moments, and I did think about it a lot afterwards. And after that visit, I found myself writing poetry as well, from the Palestinian and Israeli point of view, and trying to find some, even in myself and my feelings, some way to reconcile this seemingly unreconcilable difference of history and view.
Was the project then called Dancing Through Walls?
Yes,
right,
yes. With one or two friends, we started something. In fact, I've written a song, and there is a dance called Dancing Through Walls, which came from that project. And it was just like the idea of walking through walls, but with the help of dance and music. The walls being the perceptual wall that divides people, and dancing through it to find a way of actually dissolving that illusion. Because we know almost, I don't know that I've ever met anyone who, when you actually find out what's going on with them and what they really need and feel, that you can't feel a sort of empathy with.
Yes.
So we've kind of jumped back and forth a bit, but that was,
I thought it was important
to
to skip back to the story of that, because it does weave back into where we are now with trauma as such a significant part of the project you're setting up. But back to the future now, past. When you met Bethan, that's when you became, both of you went around the world together to do the teaching.
Not within the first 5 minutes. It took a little bit longer, but yes, it wasn't very long, strangely. It was so natural that we did both think as though, like, well, somebody figured it out and fixed it up.
How did you meet Bethan? Was it on a dance?
All right, let's go backtrack a little bit. I'd started this evening class, the one that I mentioned to you, and very soon I was asked to do a couple of others. So I had three weekly classes, and I felt very at home doing them. And the numbers started to grow. I started to grow in confidence. I was learning dances. By that time I was playing the squeeze box as well as the guitar, so I was introducing live music. And because I had this store of folk dances, I seem to have a good dance memory, or not generally a good memory, good dance memory. I had a store of folk dances that I loved and recordings. I had live music to offer, and I had the dances I'd been learning through the circle dance movement, more meditative and so on. I became a sought-after teacher within a rather quick time because of that bundle of resources. And I think because I'm user-friendly as well, I can have, I quite enjoy having a joke, and I like to put people at their ease when they're learning. So that combination meant I got invited around. And one of the invitations I had was to teach in Norwich, where Bethan was then living. I was still living in London. And on the same day, in the same venue, there was a children's day, a day of family and children's day. And in those days I did a lot of stuff with children too. I did games and party songs, and
right.
I'd been in a show for children. We missed that bit out, but we might come back and pick it up. I'd co-written a show and written a lot of participation songs for children.
That's your old school teacher part coming back.
Well, it was the better part of that. It was what emerged from it very creatively, and I still like to do those songs with kids sometimes. So I come up in the afternoon, and some of the kids there were Bethan's children, and I met her briefly. Went back in the evening to teach circle dance. There was Bethan again. I thought, there's that nice woman I had a few words with. We had a few more words, and we liked each other. And I was coordinating a holistic weekend in London, in that same community house where I was running the circle dance thing, and said to her, I think you might enjoy it. And she and a friend came along, and it was on the weekend when they came along to that I got to know her better. And luckily for us, I always think it's lucky if you can be friends first. We really started to like each other as friends, had good conversations, and something happened kind of unexpectedly.
And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. And she had 3 children. She was divorced, 5 years older than me, and probably neither of us were consciously looking for each other, but it felt right. Yes. It felt right. And we weren't in any way thinking of working together when we got together. It wasn't even like, I wonder if, it wasn't remotely thought about. But it seemed to come about very naturally in a fairly short time. Bethan had been school teaching for donkey's years. She loved dancing. Actually, right? She was school teaching and ongoing, because the dance work wasn't yet a full-time livelihood for 2 people and 3 children and 2 cats. It grew into that.
So the international aspect of your teamwork with Bethan, when did that start? Because I know you have travelled all over the world, particularly Greece, but I don't really know when that started.
Yeah. Whenever you ask me a question, I laugh, because there's always a funny story in there, kind of funny in retrospect. The School of Hard Knocks. First trip abroad, I guess we'd been teaching together a couple of years, and we'd done a New Year's residential and getting into it, and a friend of mine in London said, I think you'd like to meet my 2 theatre friends who've got a centre in France. Maybe you'd like to take a group there. Oh yeah, sounds great. So I'm not going to mention names or the centre. We arranged with these 2 people, English people who had this place in France. We arranged to go out. I'd seen photos of a reasonably spacious barn that looked empty, and they said they've got a field that we could dance on, and they had accommodation and camping. And we, great, lovely. And we arranged it. We had a fair-sized group, international group, majority from Britain. And we went a couple of days early to speak to them and to set things up. We got there, and the lady, it was a couple, the lady said, so the toilet tents are over there, and here's the hammers, and here are the... Oh, okay, right, we're going, me and Bethan are going to erect the toilet tents then. I hadn't quite figured that. We didn't speak about that. I kind of thought they might have done that. So can you show us the barn where we're going to dance? The barn. Well, we've got all our props there because we're working on a show.
Oh no.
And I said, but we have got a big group coming, and you did agree we could dance. You could dance on the lawn.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, okay. Well, the lawn, it looked all right, but it was spiky. These really spiky, hard things. Well, we eventually persuaded them to clear out the barn. We flattened down the lawn as best as we could, and made it dance worthy, and we had a mixture of dancing in the barn and on the lawn. But the catering was equally problematic. It would be 10 at night, and the lady who'd promised to do the catering, was paid for it, would say, oh, I forgot to put the potatoes on. It'll be another hour. And so we actually ended up having to take the catering away from them. Luckily, one of our group, bless you, Caroline, if you're listening to this, had experience in catering. She's a young lady, but she just had experience in group catering. She took it on with help from volunteers of our group, and we had to literally say, please, do you mind if we do all the work for you, because we need to do it our way, and we need to eat at 7 in the evening, not 11.
Did they give you a refund?
No, not at all. We ended up on all right terms because they were well-meaning, eccentric people living. I said I was in my own world when I were young, but feedback and interaction can give you a training course in getting with the plot. In their case, they seem to have found one another and developed this very special world that they inhabited. And for some reason or other, they liked the idea of a group being there, but the reality, I think we were their first group, the reality was really quite difficult for them. Anyway, so that was our trial by fire.
Initiation.
And we actually didn't immediately organise another foreign holiday, but 2 years later was the next. And then we started getting invitations to teach in America and Canada, and later Brazil, Chile, Mexico.
Gosh.
And we set things up in Portugal, Greece. We're invited to teach in Belgium, Italy, France. We became among a few people in our network who've been lucky enough to be celebritized for one reason or another. And when somebody says, well, have you had them yet? They were great, the next thing you get an invitation to somewhere else. So we're very, very lucky, partly with the timing, because we emerged on the scene when there were not hundreds of teachers. Now that there are, for someone with similar qualities, it would be a little harder to forge that path, because there are so many people offering good facilitation. A lot of people said it was nice and unusual to have a man and woman teaching together who clearly respected and liked each other, had different styles and different qualities. And I think I'm probably more of the sort of excitement creator by nature, and Bethan is more of a hold steady, feel safe and calm by nature, although we can both be in both roles. But to get together, I think people felt it was a good balance, male, female, and everything.
So wonderful. And you've been doing that up until a couple of years ago, were you?
Yeah, until COVID, really.
Teaching abroad most years?
Yes. About 8 trips a year.
8 trips a year?
Yeah, 8 trips abroad, and then lots of travelling in England. We were literally touring half the year, which I think Bethan found it more tiring than I did, but I could say the travelling was tiring, even though the teaching was very uplifting. The friendships were lovely, and staying in people's houses and getting to know the countries from the inside, meeting people's families and favourite places, and had a very, very blessed life. That's why I say, going back to the beginning of the story, if events hadn't propelled me in the direction that they did, what would have opened up? Who knows what would have opened up in my life? Maybe something else marvellous, but this was the most, I can't imagine anything that would suit me better and give me more chance to keep learning, growing, developing friendships and appreciation of different cultures. I think Bethan feels likewise, so we were very, very lucky that we were compatible as workers as well as as intimates.
So, it's a wonderful story and how you've got to this point. And I realised that you wrote a book recently, didn't you, called Dancewise?
I did.
And with an owl on the front, wonderful picture of an owl, which really stands out.
Here's one that I've already cooked, as they said on Blue Peter.
So tell me about Dancewise and how that actually weaves into the project.
I would love to, because one of my thoughts was that not only do I really enjoy the work, but it's been a great big learning experience. And is it possible to put that learning into words? When I embarked on writing it, I realised that some of my friends and colleagues who teach dance have got experience that I think is extremely interesting. One friend who was working in Brazil with teenagers in trouble with the law, a friend in Canada who's worked in mental hospitals, and I thought it'd be, a friend in California who works with recovering addicts. So I thought I would like this book to include Bethan and my experience, and a lot of, there's too many really to mention, but a lot of the people who are using dance therapeutically. Became clear to me that the enjoyment aspect of dance is really important to me, that even of special interest is the therapeutic aspect, and that includes the role that it plays in community. Not only therapy as in how you feel as an individual, but how you feel in connection with others, and how you can connect differently with other people, non-verbally. So that was the aim of the book, and it took a few years to gestate. I actually got stuck at one point and realised I had to let it go and literally just sort of wait until I kind of it came up from inside. I was trying to force something. I had to let go of that and just wait until it came. And I'm very happy with what came. I've had a lot of nice feedback. I just wanted to give an example, because every chapter starts with a picture done by
Selkie and Centaur.
Selkie and Centaur. So the artwork is done by Lois Cordelia, who also lives in Ipswich. Fantastic artist, and she did these sketches. So just for example, this chapter, Selkie and Centaur, why are we fascinated by mythical beasts? And very often they're half human, half something else. When I thought about that, I thought it's because the wild side is always in us, but we don't always know what to do with it. When we hear about it in a story, a centaur, it's like, yeah, I know, that's kind of like me. But we have to, but our upbringing encourages us to develop the civilized, rational sides, the modified behaviours, which are all part of what we need to live. Doesn't always give us any place to put the wild, spontaneous, free,
Playful side.
Playful, sometimes ecstatic, excitable. What do you do with it? That's children's stuff. So my experience is that dance is one of the avenues that gives us ways to express and actually reconnect with and learn about that side of ourselves. So I wanted to put that in a chapter. And every chapter's got a different theme. One of them, I had found myself for a year or so getting fascinated in the topic of trauma. That started before it ever occurred to me that I might myself have experienced it. I didn't even think of it. I didn't think of my childhood as being traumatizing. But the more that I've read about it, the more I realised that, as well as the obvious, very extreme and regrettable situations where people have abuse, or they're living through a war or something like that, and many of them come out with an altered neurology and an inability to come back to the life they had before, that it actually applies to a huge proportion of the population.
Massive.
Who've had, yeah, you agree, repeated experiences of that in some way close us down or leave us anxious or leave us unable to fully express or function emotionally or relate or trust, or there's all sorts of ways that it can manifest, from being numb and distant to being hyper alert and obsessive. And so it does seem to me that actually in the very fabric of society, because of our history, what some people would call trauma-based reactions like emotional distancing are just considered normal. It can be written into your culture, even something that you're told to do. Stiff upper lip. So I now look at trauma as something which is almost like an overlay that masks and damps down our human potentials. So as we start to understand it and move through it, we can start to release and uncover our potential for closeness, empathy, emotional expression, freedom, creativity, all sorts of things.
Joy.
Yes, joy. As you say, playfulness. Yeah. So there's a lot about that in this book. And since then I've been doing a lot more research and study.
And will that be for sale on the website?
This book is for sale, I say it with slight sort of hesitation, on Amazon, and you can also get it directly from me, and there definitely will be details on the new website, and there are details on my 2 existing websites.
Great.
But the new one will be very dedicated towards trauma release through movement and dance, and the integrated arts is going to have quite a broad focus. And luckily we've got another interview coming where we can
Explore
talk about that in depth.
Part 2.
Yeah. I'll just get, since we're on to books, my first book is a music book. First one I made, and it's just full of nice musical arrangements of folk and circle dance songs for people who like playing music and singing.
Great. Good. Well, Stefan, thank you for the first part of our little chat, and that's been really great to hear your whole story and how we got to this point.
I've really enjoyed having the memories refreshed and being able to because you understand it and get it. It's so nice talking with you. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Manisha.
Thank you.